All right, I think we'll get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I'm Beth Searle, President and CEO of the National Organization on Disability. Thank you for joining us today as we reflect on 1 year post the election and explore the policy landscape as it's affecting people with disabilities. It certainly has been an interesting and active year. Disability is and should always be a nonpartisan issue. Today's conversation reflects that commitment. We're proud to bring together voices from both sides of the aisle to discuss how policymakers and business leaders can advance opportunity inclusion for people with disabilities. We have quite a distinguished panel of speakers who bring a breadth of expertise and perspective, national, state, different political persuasions, etc. And together we will examine current policy developments, the implications for employers, and how to continue to build workplaces where all talent can thrive. I want to thank you all for being part of this very important conversation and for your ongoing leadership in advancing opportunity and inclusion for people with disabilities. And with no further ado, I am going to turn it over to our moderator today, my friend, my colleague, my partner in crime, Vice President of Corporate and Government Relations here at NOD, Charles Catherine.
Well, thank you, Beth, and hello, everyone. And really thank you for joining us for this webinar. And really, as Beth mentioned, I am the VP for Corporate and Government Relations, so some of you may know me. I am a white man in my 30s. I wear a blue suit, live from my office in New York City. And I want to thank our ASL interpreters for being here today. And I want to remind everybody that if you want to enable closed captions, you can click the live transcript button on the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen, and then select show subtitles. Of course, I see that the chat is already very active, which is great. But know that if you have a question, you can click the Q&A button on the toolbar, and those questions will remain anonymous. Some of you may have been with us last year when we did a similar webinar. This year, the only change is that we will have Q&A throughout the webinar, so really feel free to ask those questions and participate fully. At the end of the webinar, we will also have a brief survey. And of course, as you know, we always strive to improve our content, and so your feedback is extremely valuable. So before we continue, I want to say thank you to those who enable us to do this today, our members of our Leadership Council. We're grateful for your engagement, for your expertise, and really the example that you set for other employers striving to build inclusive workplaces. And of course, if you're not yet part of ELC, or if you don't even know what the Leadership Council is, send me a note on LinkedIn or send an email to council@nod.org and we'll remedy that. All right, so it is my absolute pleasure to welcome our panelists for today's conversation. We have Congressman Langevin, who's from Rhode Island, Democrat, and our policy ambassador, and Representative Michael Hale for the 40th House District in Tennessee General Assembly, and Jackson Lille from Chairman Hale's office. So welcome, everyone, and I'll ask each of you, in the order in which I introduced you, to give us a quick self-intro.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be on this webinar today. 1 year in. Honored to be with my colleagues from NOD, especially our CEO, Beth Searle, and of course you, Charles. And also I want to welcome Representative Lille and Representative Hale to our discussion today. And this hopefully will be a nonpartisan, bipartisan discussion to really focus on the issues of the challenges people facing with disabilities and how we help people to overcome those challenges. And really, since our focus at NOD is primarily focused on employment of people with disabilities. How do we bring down barriers and open up doors of opportunities for people with disabilities? I had the privilege of serving the United States Congress for 22 years, and I was able to leave undefeated and on my own terms when I left office to pursue other things and have a next chapter and not travel as much. And so I'm enjoying my work with National Organization on Disabilities as policy ambassador. I had created and co-chaired the Bipartisan Disabilities Caucus in the United States Congress. And in that position, we helped work in a bipartisan way to promote access and inclusion of people with disabilities and opportunities for people with disabilities. And I'm glad I could use those the passion that I developed there and the skills in Congress now to benefit the disability community in the private sector now with National Organization on Disabilities. So great to be with everyone today, and I'm looking forward to our discussion this afternoon.
Thank you, Congressman. Representative Hale.
Yes, I'm Michael Hale, State Representative of the 40th District here in Tennessee. And I'm finishing up my second term and getting ready to run again. So it's been a joy. One of the things that has been a big thing for me, I have worked along with my assistant, Jax. We have worked with the Disability Coalition extensively, carried legislation, not just because me being in a wheelchair myself from Guillain-Barré and some issues from that, but just the fact of making sure that we're taking care of those that need to be taken care of. And it's my heartbeat, it's my passion. Of course, on the side, that's a side job, I guess you would say, or a side position calling to serve the people of the 40th District, about 70,000 people that I represent. But then I also own a funeral home, my wife and I, and then we own a wedding and event center that we just opened, and then a farm, as I mentioned earlier, that been out on the farm this morning. So very busy life. We used to pastor, haven't pastored since 2013 but still do a lot of fill in from that standpoint. But serving people has been my heartbeat and passion, and so it's an honor, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and discuss these issues. And because these people, these folks, whether they're in Tennessee or anywhere across the United States, I want to be a voice for them and do what we can to represent them.
Thank you. And Jackson Lille.
Yeah, so my name is Jackson Lille, or I go by Jax, Jax as a nickname. I am Representative Michael Hale's legislative assistant. I've been working with him since about a month after his election. Seems to still be going well, still here. So, but as he mentioned, we've done a lot of disability policy, a lot of work with the Tennessee Disability Coalition. That's always just kind of been one of our forefronts. But everything that we do, whether it's disability policy, we've done a lot of food insecurity policy over the past couple of years. Everything we do is targeted towards serving other people and helping other people, which is something that I'm very, very proud and love to get to tell people about, that's the work that we do. So we're really, we're thankful to be here with y'all, excited to discuss these policy initiatives, and hoping that more good can come out of it, and we can continue to work to make this whole country, and especially for us in Tennessee, a better place to live.
Thank you. And I'll start by saying that, when I look at my country, I see a lot of people concerned about their jobs and the AI revolution, concerned about budget cuts and how it might affect their lives, concerned about inflation and their quality of life, and really, most importantly, concerned about the growing division within the political landscape that really blocks the system and creates instability. As you all understood, I'm talking about France, where I grew up, where we went through 5 prime ministers since January 2024, and where we can't seem to pass a budget. but I could be talking about America as well, my other country, and many other countries. And all of this to say that I think many countries are going through similar issues. And I think we'll also realize that I'll never have my own show on HBO. But I will start us off by really wanting to hear from our panelists who bring different perspectives to the table, right? Describing the broader vision of this administration when it comes to equity and inclusion, when it comes to protected classes, and how do you see that reflected in policies around programs like Medicaid or digital accessibility or maybe DI initiatives at large? So, Congressman, we'll start with you.
Thank you. So obviously, where there's a election has consequences, and we're seeing the priorities of the current administration being implemented, which is to there was a message sent by voters that they thought Washington had gotten too big, and so and perhaps there's overreach, and so now the budget priorities are uh, being implemented that are downsizing many areas of government, um, and we're seeing uh, a defunding of many programs, which is of concern on a number of levels, but certainly particularly on the healthcare side. So we don't know where this is going to end up yet, because it still has to go through the many things through the budgetary process, other than what has already been enacted, which is the significant cuts to the healthcare programs under Medicaid. And whether that could be reversed or not is yet to be seen. But we have, I believe, an opportunity to speak out and with one voice and try to do things in a more balanced approach, as opposed to the many of the harsh cuts that we've seen. I do want to say that where there are opportunities, I think we should be focused as a community on trying to create opportunity for work opportunities for entering the workforce, and whenever we can remove those barriers, I think that would be of something that we can both agree on, both sides, and both Washington and the states across the country. But just putting all of this in context, again, disability being a bipartisan issue. If we kind of look as our guiding light, as our North Star, if you will, the Americans with Disabilities Act was a bipartisan piece of legislation and signed into law by a Republican president. And there were many giants on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate, that came together in a bipartisan way to pass the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it really was the civil rights law of our time, and has, for me personally, has changed the world, as it has for millions of other people in this country. And I should mention, I became a member of the disability community at the age of 16. I didn't mention in my opening, but I'm a C5-6 quadriplegic as a result of an accidental gunshot that left me paralyzed from the upper chest down. And I remember my accident happened in 1980. So I remember clearly what the world was like before the ADA was passed. And I remember now, I clearly understand what it's like now that the Americans with Disabilities Act is the law of the land. And I can honestly say that I most likely would not have been in the United States Congress were the ADA not passed. And I was able to, I entered the world of politics, having much more of a level playing field that ensured equal access to things like air travel and accommodations, things that didn't per se always exist before the ADA was passed. So, if we can kind of recenter, refocus as a country on the bipartisan nature of disabilities and the ADA, I think we'll be stronger as a country.
Well, that's a great segue to your Representative Hale, in terms of this bipartisan approach to disability inclusion, and the fact that, if we all age long enough, we'll eventually acquire a disability, right? And so how would you say the shift since the new administration came into power affected our community? And do you have any concerns, most specifically around maybe the role that states will have to play with all those budget cuts? And we talked about Medicaid. We know this will have an effect on the states and their ability to serve the constituents.
Right. You know, and I have asked, since the passage of the big beautiful bill and just um, throughout, my concern has been, where does it leave us as a state? Tennessee is not an expansion state, so there's some things that's a little bit different for us than maybe other states that were Medicaid expansion states, for instance. But disability is something that I, first of all, as with the congressman, this is not a Republican or Democrat issue. This is something that we're talking about Americans, we're talking about Tennesseans, we're talking about Rhode Island folks, we're talking about people and I think sometimes for the administration, whether it's at the federal level or the state level, unless you're affected by it, you don't fully understand the needs and how it affects a family. For instance, last week when we were in budget, we had the uh, one of the departments, conservation department. So I was talking to him about parks, and one of my questions was, where are we at to make sure that our parks are as accessible as they can be? We have Tennessee really went to the forefront and was glad to be a part of that. We've got wheelchairs where families are able to go out to the parks and be able to enjoy nature and stuff, because there's so many times that for us, we have to look and say, okay, what's the terrain? Can I go? My wife, my kids may be able to go, but can I go? But getting to the point of policy, I think there's a major concern for all of us, Republican, Democrat, regardless, for people as a whole, for us to see where everything's going to unfold and where we're going to be. For instance, I saw a message there pop up about SNAP. Getting into that, I was got a TV interview in the morning about this, but I was a part with one of our senators and another representative. We raised $50,000 to be able to purchase a truckload of food to serve constituents in our districts. So, I mean, I've been there, I've walked it, I've lived it. I've employed disabled folks. Won an award for one of the girls. I saw her in town the other day, and she still calls me bossy. But she has some severe disabilities, but was able to come and they would clean or they would mop and they would spray the porches and just do stuff. I employed them every week for probably about 6 years, till the company that they were working with kind of dissolved. But I mean, that's been my heartbeat, and because it's not about an RRD, this is about people. This is about making sure that the lives of every Tennessean, but ultimately every American, regardless of their disability, regardless of what they have, what they're struggling with, that they're able to enjoy life and have uh, be able to live those dreams out regardless of their disability.
Thank you. And Jax, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I will say one of the biggest challenges I think that we on the state level are facing,
Mhm.
and it was kind of mentioned, is that the protections, the funding, all of the really the accessibility measures that we have for the disability community are all federal. And so the risk of those being reduced, completely cut, dissolved,
Mhm.
um, that's something that we as the state, we prioritize trying to step in and find those gaps so that we can step in and fill them.
Mhm.
That's one of the biggest things that we have to look at right now.
Right. And of course, there's the risk that wealthier states will be able to jump in more than others, and that might create inequalities and hurt our community in various ways. Congressman, you started by mentioning that elections have consequences. I will say personally, we spoke exactly a year ago, roughly around the elections, and I I don't know, I'm an optimist at heart, and I thought that, because disability is such a bipartisan issue and it affects everyone, as you said, more or less. I thought this would not be sort of on the chopping blocks, right? And it wouldn't be as stigmatized. But I will say that, and we'll talk about Section 503, and we'll talk about other employment related topics, but this has clearly been more jeopardized than in the prior Trump administration. Um, was that a surprise to you, Congressman? And do you feel the same way?
Uh, it was a surprise uh, to me in the sense that uh, I thought under the first administration of President Trump that there was still this bipartisan air around disability. I wasn't really expecting much of a difference, uh, but unfortunately, the, the disabilities have been caught up in the DEI removal effort
Mhm.
on the part of the administration, and the 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 problem is by doing that, the opportunities that might have otherwise or pathways that might have existed for people with disabilities might be cut off. We're waiting to see what happens.
Mhm.
For example, with Section 503,
Mhm.
that it sets a goal encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll talk about that a little later.
So
Yeah.
I'll pause on that there, but I think I understand there's two things happening that major priorities.
Mhm.
There's Doge, which is uh, cutting government waste, and we can all agree on that. There's a lot of government waste, and we certainly should find ways to eliminate waste wherever possible. But I think it's been too uh, broad stroke as opposed to looking specifically at what's working and what's not working. And we've been caught up in that. And then, of course, the big beautiful bill has, uh, impacted healthcare through the cuts that to things like Medicaid, which are going to impact the states, and that's particularly troubling and challenging for states now
Yeah.
to deal with that.
Yeah. And
But
actually, since we're on that, I'm seeing some questions in the Q&A about those actions that could be taken from the state perspective to fill those gaps. So maybe Representative Hale or Jax, if you want. Do you
Well, that's a
have
good
any?
segue. Let me
Yeah,
mention this, and
go.
I'll throw it to Representative Hale. But one of the things, again, looking for what the states can do, they can follow the lead of states like Tennessee and Rhode Island and Massachusetts and other states that have allowed for a creation of a Medicaid buy-in program,
Mhm.
so that people with disabilities can go to work and not lose their community supports, like health aides, the CNAs that are just vital to helping people just to get out of bed in the morning. That's a barrier that uh, if you don't have a Medicaid buy-in program in your state, if you go over a certain income limit, then you lose your health care benefits and your health aides, those community supports that are so vital for independent living.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things that Tennessee and Rhode Island has done, and again, a number of other states. And then we've removed that barrier now, so someone can go to work, they can get a promotion, they can get a raise, and they won't be pushed out of those vital community supports that allow them to carve their own independent path to success and realize the American dream. But I'm sure that Representative Hale has something that he could add.
Yes, here in Tennessee, Congressman, and to you, Charles, we we have invested money into, for instance, in the Upper Cumberland area that's a part of a 14 county service area through the Upper Cumberland Development District. There's Empower Upper Cumberland, and this is helping a lot of people. Matter of fact, I've got a meeting with them in the coming weeks that they want to discuss where they've been able to help people, and some they've even been able to come off of some government programs and things like that. But the benefit that it's been to these people in their communities from very rural communities, where there's not a lot of opportunity, and so they've been able to do that. But it continues to be a discussion, and what can we do? How can we grow that? How can we, we've done like a family paid caregiver here in Tennessee, where they were having to hire other people, and people were still having to work to take care of transporting, getting, and doing some of these things for their family members, where that now they're able to get paid for those things as the family. So we are continually looking at opportunities. And another thing, Tennessee has, of course, the hospitals and stuff. There's this shared savings that we get, um, money that we invest, but then we get other monies that come in. We are looking at how we can improve the lives of disabled, and what we can do for those and how we can grow those services. And so our director of TennCare, Steve Smith, and Ashley Reed, their legislative person, we are really working at what we can do. Now, sometimes we get some pushbacks, and I get a little frustrated, and I have to call them down on the carpet, so to speak. But it's about people. And so, we've got the business side, and I get that. But we also, I think in Tennessee, our TennCare budget's about 18.6, $18.8 billion, give or take. And so that's a huge chunk of our $56 billion budget. But I also say this for Tennessee, Congressman, as you mentioned, Rhode Island and other states, they say you can tell from a person what their heart is by looking at their checkbook. Tennessee is one of those states where we put those dollars in, and as long as I'm here, I mean, I want to continue that fight, that we make sure that we're doing everything we can as a state. And when we have those cuts, I've had conversations with our speaker and leadership of making sure that when we're looking at our budget, that we do not, as I call it, tie our hands, kind of a country term, that we have those dollars to be able to make up, that we're not so strapped that we can make up when there's federal cuts. Our people don't suffer from it, but we're able to step up to the plate and make sure that our people get what they need.
Since we're talking about budgets and we're getting tactical, which I really like, there's a topic that I think we should raise when it comes to employment. It's the voc rehab system, vocational rehab. With all those cuts and announces that are made that there won't be any, there's no hope really for the voc rehab system to get more funding. Are you concerned, both of you, Congressman and Representative Hale, are you concerned about access to work and really these agencies being able to deliver the service? And we know the voc system isn't perfect. I'm not gonna say that, but still, it's the only viable system we have currently, and it is, really jeopardized by some of those budget decisions. Do you have any thoughts there?
It's certainly very concerned about voc rehab programs and how they'll be impacted. They are in many ways a vital lifeline, a bridge between independence and opportunity for people with disabilities. And so, again, that's what I mean by, we should be strategic in cuts and not doing it in broad brush, because it has unintended consequences, like cutting the voc rehab type programs. One of the things that, again, removing barriers to unemployment and earning a good paying job is this idea of eliminating paying people with disabilities a sub-minimum wage. Rhode Island was one of those states that had a consent decree. It wasn't a result of legislation, but a consent decree that the state had to enter into with the Justice Department, which closed a lot of our sheltered workshops and allowed for and it required that the unemployment dollars or employment Department of Labor and Training dollars be used to help people with disabilities get meaningful jobs, so that whether it's part-time or full-time opportunities, they were able to transition people into employment and earning a minimum wage that helps them get on that path to independence. So those are the types of things, steps that we should look at passing. I'd like to see that happen at the national level. I know there is legislation, TICA legislation, it's called, that would do that, eliminate the sub-minimum wage. Right now, there are certificates or a number of businesses that have a certificate that allow for employing someone with a disability that and paying them sub-minimum wage. And the freezing or eliminating of that would help to encourage independence.
Yes, and the 14C conversations of the use of minimum wage is interesting because it shows both how you can make progress at the state level, and I think we have more and more states phasing out. You mentioned Rhode Island. I think there's 17 now or more, and the conversation at the national level, which remains right now blocked at many levels, but still, because we have more and more states sort of making the case that this is possible, that this is beneficial, and that this works for people with disabilities, it helps move the conversation forward. So thank you for bringing that up, Congressman.
I don't know
Now,
if anything if Beth had anything that she wanted to add, or Representative Hale had anything.
go ahead, or Jax. You haven't spoken in a while.
Yeah, so I know, especially here in Tennessee, we've really put a lot of emphasis on, and we've really prioritized apprenticeships and these side-by-side models of higher education and secondary education at the same time. We have a program here in Tennessee called Middle College that allows high school students to attend community college at the same time that they're attending high school, and they earn their associate's degree actually a couple of weeks before they graduate high school. And so I think that one of the ways on the state level, we've been very blessed to have those programs, but I'm not sure how much we've really emphasized the connection between those programs and the disability community. And so I think that that's definitely something we can look more proactively at and say, we've got these programs that are reaching into rural parts of the state. We've got them that reach into the more urban parts of the state with connecting them into like the local universities. But how are we going to reach the disability community from, far west Tennessee to far east Tennessee? And so I think that, especially as we're talking about these vocational shortfalls, that's something that we definitely are able to take a look at.
Thank you. And now I'm going to switch gears slightly. I'm going to move to a conversation around Section 503. So really about companies that are federal contractors. And in July, it was announced that the 7% hiring goal for federal contractors, which has been in place since 2013, might be rolled back. And although this is a goal, not a quota, meaning that this is aspirational, it is still seen, I think, by some as administrative constraints, right? And so there was a request for comments, and there were over 600 comments posted. And over 90% of those were against the rollback of this 7% hiring goal for people with disabilities. Sometimes they call it the utilization goal. And Congressman, I'd like to hear your thoughts because you've already touched on Section 503 and maybe what it says about the current approach of the administration when it comes to disability employment. So please expand on that.
Yeah, again, this is an area, we should be focusing as, employment as a bipartisan issue. And it would be troubling if the 7% goal was eliminated. And so again, it's a goal, not a requirement. So there's nothing really restrictive about it. It's just calling attention to the fact that this is something that would give business hopefully you know, when they're setting their priorities, that knowing that their goal exists under Section 503, that they would redouble efforts to reach out and be proactive about hiring people with disabilities. Again, not a requirement, but certainly would encourage. And so doing things like, for example, also if eliminating things like self-identification requirements, in that would basically result, I believe, in losing the primary data set that's used to track representation and hiring and advancement of disabled workers, and that really makes it harder to diagnose workforce barriers and identify resource accommodations to really prove progress toward accessibility and inclusion of people with disabilities in the workforce.
Yeah.
And why it's so important, again, if we want people to transition from government programs to government services, we need to make sure that we're providing opportunities for people with disabilities to work. The ADA was a fantastic piece of legislation and obviously a paradigm shift for people with disabilities and the world, really in different ways as a model for how to bring down barriers and open up doors of opportunity for people with disabilities. But there is still misconceptions or fears about hiring someone with a disability. And what does, for example, a reasonable accommodation mean? And it's without a focused effort and priority on saying, hey, this is something that we should make a priority in terms of hitting that 7% target. I'm concerned that we'll see a rollback in the progress we've made toward employment of people with disabilities.
Thank you, Congressman. Representative Hale, any thoughts on, hiring goals, data to help measure progress for companies or otherwise, thoughts on data in general?
Well, I think one of the things that I think, and listening to Congressman there, that we've come to a point that that some of this, the rollback, it's almost like that if we remove all of that, then holding companies accountable, businesses accountable for hiring and have you, are you trying to, I guess it comes to this, are we trying to create opportunities as businesses? Are we, whether it's a corporate owned or if it's a privately owned, are we trying to create opportunities to better these people? But then, I think that sometimes that federal and state, we don't incentivize, we don't create opportunities for those businesses. And when we start cutting these things, when we start, doing away, again, it ultimately hurts the people that we should be helping. And so I just think that one of the things that seems to be now a bad thing is accountability. And whether it's state, federal, local, our leaders, but then also the fact of our businesses. We should be, let me say this. In Tennessee, we're always looking at, what's the next business we can get here? What's the next thing that we can get to grow Tennessee's industry? But with that being said, and I want to see us grow, but also we have to stop and think, what are we doing to incentivize? What are we doing to create opportunities for the people that are here? Are we giving everybody the equal opportunity for jobs. And listen, if that person with a disability is able to do the same job as a person that's non-disabled, then that person should be paid the same money. There should not be a discrepancy for those people. They should be able, so we've got to, I think there's a lot of work there, and we have got to better the lives of disabled, but we've got to accountability for our government, but then also accountability for our businesses.
And
Thank you.
Charles, if I could jump in there, because I agree with Representative Hale on the incentive portion, and that's something that we're actually trying to create. What I'd like to see created eventually is starting with the Defense Department and federal hiring and contracting, and that's to create a point system as opposed to just a goal system. So there are different when a major contractor they're bidding for a government contract. There are certain programs right now that if you hit certain marks, you get extra points toward the contract being awarded, and that could be any number of reasons why they do that. What we'd like to do, and there's a study that my colleague, former colleague, Representative Joe Courtney from Connecticut, has put in. What would it look like if the Pentagon would create an incentive program for businesses that do hit that 7% goal, and it gives them a couple of extra points toward getting a contract? Again, not a requirement for the business, but an incentive. And why an incentive is so important is that it helps I believe, like the company and the hiring practices redouble their efforts to say, hey, what would it be? Does it mean to have a reasonable accommodation in hiring? What is it? A piece of technology? Is it a desk that needs to be elevated so a person can get their knees underneath the desk to get to the keyboard to be able to do the work they otherwise would be able to do? Is there a ramp that needs to be put in? Those are the types of things that that don't cost a lot of money, but a business, if they were to redouble their efforts, might hire the person with disability and not just brush past them because maybe they're thinking that person has a disability and it's going to be too much of a hassle to hire them, so we just won't look at that. We'll just go on to the next candidate. I want to make sure that we're just leveling the playing field, and that's where I think an incentive program comes in. I also want to mention I'm grateful to my former colleague, Chairman Mike Rogers of the House Armed Services Committee. When we were there in May for our Hill Day, we met with both the chairman and ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, on which I used to sit for 22 years. And Chairman Rogers was great about including language in the National Defense Authorization Act, which would have a program would basically develop an advanced, helping look at advanced manufacturing, where our needs are and what opportunities might exist there. So I won't read the whole thing, but basically it would require the Secretary of Defense to establish a working group as part of the Industry Resilience Consortium to identify opportunities to address workforce shortages in advanced manufacturing career fields in the defense industrial base. The committee believes that this working group would be well suited to identify opportunities of employment for individuals with disabilities, including disabled veterans and in the advanced manufacturing workforce.
Well, thank you, Congressman. Yeah, for looking forward, right, at things that we could do proactively as a community to work with both the administration and some companies to incentivize hiring people with disabilities. There are a few ongoing legislations that are not new, by the way, that are for the most part reintroduced in this current Congress around SSI reforms, around Transformation to Competitive Integrated Employment Act, TCIEA, around 14C and the elimination of minimum wage. The Marriage Penalty Elimination Act, because as some of you may know, some people with disabilities, if they get married, may lose eligibility to their benefits. And of course, the expansion of ABLE accounts, which, if you don't know what ABLE accounts are, you should check them out. It's a great tool to incentivize both saving and employment for people with disabilities. Um, I also we've talked a lot about the Trump administration here, of course, but these are conversations we've had under several administrations, both Democratic and Republican. Any thoughts there from both of you, Congressman and Representative Hale, in terms of what this means, and maybe what are some of the things you're hopeful about?
Well, again, I'll come back to, we should be focusing right now, again, given the current environment and the result of the election, that if we want to kind of communicate across the aisle, we need to make employment the kind of the common thread and opportunities going forward for people with disabilities, and bringing down barriers, creating opportunities for work. We want to create work opportunities, creating jobs, getting people into good paying jobs, and that can happen in a number of ways. And we did talk about Section 503, but education and upskilling are still big areas for bringing down barriers. And I believe that with this AI revolution that's happening, by the way, we should be looking at opportunities to help people to upskill both our current workforce and making sure that in our schools we're producing AI-ready graduates. That goes through K through 12 and higher education. But again, leaving no worker behind. That also means using AI skills for upskilling for current workers as well. And that obviously impacts everybody, disabled and non-disabled.
Thank you. Representative Hale, any thoughts on things you're hopeful about? And
I would, again, as we sit here and have this conversation, and I'm humbled to be a part of the conversation. I think of, as we look at the whole picture and the whole scope of things, of course, states are looking to Washington to see what Washington's going to do, and see where the dollars are going to be, and see what policy is going to be, and see what what things are passed down. But but also, we can't sit back and just wait on Washington. Each individual state has got to step up to the plate and be a leader. One of the mottos of Tennessee has been leading the nation. Well, we may look at and say, we're leading here, but then we're failing here, whether it's regardless what that part is that we're lacking in. But I think overall, we have to understand, as I said this in the beginning, when we sit here and talk about employing disabled people, when we talk about government programs, I go back to Scripture. The Scripture says the needy we're always going to have among us. There's going to be people that are hurting. There's going to be people that are broken. There's going to be people that have needs. But what are we doing as government? It's not just, a lot of people, it's not just the government's responsibility to take care of everything for everybody, and I get that. But at the same time, are we doing everything we can for the people that calls, whether it's Tennessee home or any other state, any of our other states, Rhode Island, California, Texas, I don't care what state it is, we call this home. But they're looking to us for answers and for solutions. And to the congressman, we have got to do, we look to Washington, but yet I say sometimes we need to look in the mirror, and what are we doing? What am I doing to step up to the plate to make sure that the needs of every person, because every person deserves opportunity. I don't care what their disability is. We've got, and I saw a comment there, we look many times at disabilities as the things that we can see. Guys, there's a lot of things that people are dealing with that are disabilities that cannot be seen, and we have to look and make sure that we're seeing all of those needs, whether it's veterans that are, that have served our country and fought, or whether it's somebody with a disability from birth, whatever that is, or as the congressman's, that from an injury, or mine at 30 years old, whatever that place is, we've got to make sure that we're doing everything possible for every person. And there's so much work to do, Charles, that we can't discuss it all in an hour conversation, but there is so much that we need to do.
Thank you, Representative. And that's a good reminder. I mean, I did not share this in my intro, but I am blind, right? And it's something that I've had to disclose more and more now in this remote world, where, my cane does not disclose for me anymore, right? And to your point, the vast majority of disabilities are hidden, more than 70%, right? And so our community is very diverse, and that makes also our advocacy more challenging in certain ways because, there is mental health, there is neurodiversity, and each group has its own agenda. But there are topics on which we all agree, right? Because philosophically, it's about, as you said, making sure that people have what they need to show their talent and to display their skills. We have a bunch of questions. We have very limited time, but and we've tried to cover already some of them. But the first question I wanted to start with, and I'll ask everybody to be brief, is in terms of enforcement. We know that budgets are going to affect OFCCP, they're going to affect the EEOC, and really enforcement in general. Congressman, I'll start with you. How do you think that's going to affect our community? And do you have any concerns there?
Deep concerns, especially with OFCCP being cut significantly. Again, programs that maybe legislatively on it being eliminated, but financially are being decimated is a great concern. And look at offices like OFCCP that collects the data and works on things like enforcement or shining transparency onto where there's unfulfilled requirements.
Mm-hmm.
That's deeply it's a setback. And there were we had the opportunity to talk to one of the previous directors of CCP under Republican administration, and there were things that we could still do in the disability community with the people doing the jobs of the office when it was for which it was created, but without the funding, without the people, it's clearly the work isn't going to get.
And that's going to affect employment, civil rights, but also digital accessibility, ADA enforcement, everything. We're welcoming Zach from the Rich Policy Group, who's a lobbyist and someone who could help us also field some of those questions. Zach, I don't know if you're super familiar with Waiwa, but I was wondering if you heard anything now that you work and live in DC. Any specific insights there, and maybe a little bit of a background on what you know on Waiwa.
Thanks, Charles. It really is a pleasure to be here and to work with you all. With the Ridge Policy Group, we lobby on a number of things, including appropriations, a lot around vocational rehabilitation, and we are pleased to see that Congress has raised their top line for that number. We'll see what happens in terms of whether or not we get a budget, whether we get a continuing resolution, but there's at least positive momentum right now. In terms of WIOA, I have not heard specific conversations around that. I think there is a lot of reluctance to reopen and reauthorize because of the potential negative consequences that come with opening a program back up. You have winners and you have losers when something like that happens. But I'll definitely keep my ear to the ground and I'll let you know.
Okay.
Conversations keep developing.
Thank you. I've seen some comments about Section 504 about education, and that's more of a state level question, right? And the community there was very mobilized and I think successfully advocated. Representative Hale, any local issues around disability that you think should be more in the news and people should consider more when it comes to disability inclusion?
I think, and I saw something pop up there a minute ago, and you mentioned it, Charles. And I hit this a minute ago. We talk about seen and unseen disabilities. Probably one of the greatest one for so long that was swept under a rug was mental health. Um, I remember the day that I um, went to boot camp, and when I was first elected, went to the Capitol. I remember our speaker standing in front of us and talking, and he said, when it comes to mental health, he said, we either make a large investment up front or you're going to make a larger investment later on for those people that are struggling with mental health. I've toured some mental health facilities this summer as we've been out of session and had a lot of conversation. There is so much work, and we're seeing mental health. Here in Tennessee, we've got mental health advocates, nurses, and stuff in our schools. We don't, like in DeKalb County where I live, we've got 5 schools, but we've got one that travels among those 5 schools. But the state has funded those positions because we're seeing mental health at a much younger age.
Mhm.
But I think for so long it was kind of swept under the rug. We didn't discuss it. We didn't talk about it. But it's a real problem that people have. It's a real sickness. It's a real thing. And now we need to work on it. We need to um, uh, focus on helping those people. But I Charles, to come back to the cut issue,
Mhm.
I have a major problem with when we start cutting some of these programs and some of these fundings, because uh, when we do that, the people that need it the most
Mhm.
hurt the most, and that's not what we should be doing. And uh, we can do away with some corporate taxes. We can do. I mean, there's some places that we can do some stuff, but don't hurt those that need it the most.
Thank you for that. And I saw a note on Medicaid. I feel like we covered this earlier, but I want to double down because this is indeed a very important topic. And I think on the one hand, we hear people say, yes, people with disabilities will not lose their eligibility, but we know that in practice that's not true, right? Because there's a lot of people that will have trouble proving their status, the paperwork that comes with that, the work eligibility status, and people that may be misdiagnosed, right? We talked about mental health, we could talk about autism. There's just so many other potential scenarios. And, we're talking about $1 trillion worth of cuts, right? Over a decade. And we know that Medicaid is the key, and identity will focus on employment. And of course, today we've been biased in that, we've been focusing on employment-related issues. But Medicaid is, I think, the number one conversation. Congressman, would you agree? And then
I
we'll have to wrap.
I would agree, especially we were talking $1 trillion in cuts over 10 years. There's no state that can absorb,
Mhm.
that level of cuts. It's just not going to be possible, which means services are going to suffer. And as Representative Hale identified, many of these programs serve the most vulnerable. And so that's why I'm hoping there's going to be a relook at the conversation in Washington, and as the budget process goes through, we can, you know,
Thank you.
resource properly those programs that do help the most vulnerable among us.
Thank you, Congressman. And thank you to everybody in the chat who it was very, very dynamic. I think this is one of our most popular webinars. So I want to thank everybody on our panel, Jax, Representative Hale, Zach, and you, Congressman. Um, we will do our best to respond individually to people who ask questions that were unanswered. And I will add that we will have a launch of a new platform, which will be asynchronous trainings on disability inclusion called Enable Learning. And so this will be a dynamic platform that will help support mental health, neurodiversity, and all form of disability in the workplace. So keep an eye out, and for your inbox, it will be coming. And we will send the recording. I've seen some questions about this as well. We will send this to your emails as well. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.